Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a 1977 movie called New York, New York. This was directed by Martin Scorsese. It stars Liza Minnelli, Robert De Niro. The storyline is very familiar. It's a Star is Born kind of storyline. Certainly, Scorsese probably had more in mind the original, or not the original, but the remake from the 1950s that starred Judy Garland, Liza Minnelli's mother, and James Mason. And of course, Star is Born was remade in the 1970s, and then again recently with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. And La La Land too is another movie that is set on the same storyline of two young people who are musicians. They're starting out their careers and are enjoined, and they go separate ways. One becomes very famous, one not so famous. One in this film particularly, De Niro is consumed with his art. Liza Minnelli becomes a big superstar, much more commercial and much more mainstream. And as in the introduction to the film that's included as a supplement in this Blu-ray, Scorsese talks about the experimental nature of New York, New York, in that he wanted to use the artifice of these MGM musicals that were so elaborate, with elaborate sets. We knew it wasn't real, and try to meld a more real type of performance that goes to Kazan and Cassavetes, exemplified by Robert De Niro, and exemplified by the improvisational skill of De Niro. Originally, the original treatment for New York, New York wasn't nearly as dark. The darkness came when Scorsese brought on Martin to contribute to the screenplay, and then with De Niro's kind of volcanic explosions of acting, whether that can fit into what the other actors are playing, because although Liza Minnelli certainly is very valiant in trying to keep up with what Scorsese is doing, everybody in the rest of the film sort of looks at him, like they're almost like in a different movie than De Niro. But Scorsese thought it was, at the end of his commentary, he also does an audio commentary on the film, and at the end he said, and I think this is probably from around 2005, he said, I recently looked at the film and I was not satisfied with what we did with the improvisations. They weren't precise enough, but they were useful as far as adopting the process, and that same process used in Raging Bull, where he thought that approach worked very well. Of course, he had Joe Pesci and to play off of. Here he's playing off of characters, actors that are not used. Certainly Liza Minnelli was not. But I thought Liza Minnelli, and one of the reasons I really love this film is because of Liza Minnelli, because of the musical numbers. And when I saw it in the movies a couple times, the original, and then when they reinstituted the happy ending. It's just such a beautiful film, and the MGM, the tribute to the MGM musicals is just so gorgeous, and it has an interesting history of release history, in that this happy ending, this long, I think it's 12, maybe even longer, 12 minutes or longer. The editing, and they thought it went on too long, and the editors, and that it would be better if the storyline stops, we get this long happy ending sequence, which is obviously fake. It's sort of like on a stage, and then we're seeing it as a movie, and by the end of it, and then we go back to the story again. So they cut it down to about a third of it. When the movie came out, did not get good reviews. The audience wasn't there, so they re-released it a couple years later with the shortened version of it. I guess they took about 20 minutes out. That didn't work with audiences. And then in 1981, they decided to put everything back in, and including the 2/3 of the happy endings sequence. So that worked. I mean, I remember seeing that version of it with a packed audience, and some of the reviews, which were respectfully negative for the original release, were much more positive. Again, the Candor and Ebb songs that were written for Liza Minnelli, they were longtime collaborators, and they wrote the world spins round, I think it's called, and then of course New York, New York. The irony of the New York, New York song is that, and which is the emotional high point of the movie, comes after the happy endings, when Liza Minnelli is a huge superstar, and when they heard the version and they heard the song, and they were just like, wow, this is going to be a huge hit. But then nobody went to see the movie. That song got overlooked. 2 years later, Frank Sinatra recorded it and became the standard that it is today. But all the musical sequences in this film are great. I didn't really mind the artifice. Yeah, De Niro is over the top. He's for, in the audience point of view, he's kind of obnoxious. You wonder how Francine could have ever fallen for this guy. He never gets beyond his narcissism. What's one of the things that I find so interesting about Scorsese is his obsession with this kind of toxic male behavior, you know, of Johnny Boy and Mean Streets, and the Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle, and Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull. And really going on to many of his male characters, and Kazan and Cassavetes are mentioned, but really it's Fellini that I think is one of the, at least in this aspect of Scorsese's movies. Jake LaMotta is very similar to the Anthony Quinn character in La Strada, and I think Fellini goes for a tragic element in his movies that Scorsese also does, because even though De Niro is very over the top, he has these moments of quietude, and he's on the phone miming a conversation in order to impress Liza Minnelli's character, who's recently got her big break, and he wants to show her, oh, I'm still in demand too, and there's a look in his eyes where, you know, he realized, and at the end of the film as well, where he realizes that he's never going to be able to overcome what he wants. This is what I want. The music is the most important. The artistic obsession with his own art versus living a real life with another woman who, for some reason, loves him, and you never really get a sense that he loves her as much as she loves him. Also there's on the supplements, there's a really good documentary called New York, New York Stories, where they interview the producers, very hands-on producers Scorsese had, and had a great relationship with them. Laszlo Kovacs, the cinematographer, they had such great talent on the set designer, and the legendary talent, and I think it shows. Kovacs was convinced that this improvisational clash, that this improvisational approach clashed with the artifice, and he said, I told Scorsese, for instance, in the scene where they reunite in a nightclub, and then they go out, and all of a sudden they go outside the nightclub, and they're in a snowy scene with a forest, painted backgrounds, and obviously not real. And yet we're seeing a real scene of emotional truth that's being tried to be explored against this artificial background. But I don't know. There's something about it that I really love. I've always loved this movie, you know, and sometimes I think I love failure. I find failure more interesting than success. So when people say Scorsese, it's Goodfellas, it's Casino, it's Raging Bull, it's Taxi Driver. I don't know. This may be my favorite Martin Scorsese movie, mostly because of Liza Minnelli, maybe, and the great music, and I love the recreation, the happy endings, and just the whole artifice of trying to recreate sets. And we see Scorsese in the commentary, he's constantly referring back to movies. Every shot, every scene, he talks about, well, this was from, this movie, and this was, and I have a pretty good knowledge of old movies. I lose track of where he's going with all these influences. And for such a movie-obsessed nerd as Scorsese, I guess this kind of self-consciousness is almost inevitable. It cannot be avoided, as similarly with Tarantino. This is just the movie history is so much part of him that everything that he wants to shoot is a reference to another movie. Whether that's the inevitability of it is. It might be true. Whether it's contributes to the success or the failure of the movie is kind of a fascinating question to me. At any rate, that's my commentary on New York, New York. Again, I love the movie. I know everybody doesn't, but that's the way it goes. When you watch a lot of movies, you're going to have favorites, and other people will have other favorites. So that, again, thanks a lot for everybody who stuck with me to the end. I really appreciate it. I'll catch you guys next time.